Hello everyone, how are you all? I hope everyone is safe and healthy. Today in this video, we are going to discuss a few case-based discussions. I have made a 5 case-based questions and I have named them as Panch Pataka. So crack them if you can. Coming to first question. Uh, what is the first thing you should do after seeing such big questions? The only thing is don't get panicked and read them very patiently. Okay, and divide the question into various parts. In such big questions, there are very unnecessary things which will be given, and you should try learning eliminating them. So, first thing is a 45-year-old female patient came to the Department of Oral Surgery for extraction of 3/6. On taking medical history, she was a known hypertensive and diabetic since 3 years and was suffering with significant liver dysfunction since 1 year. Which of the following local anesthetic agent is a relative contraindication in such patients? So, what is the question asked here is LA agent, which is a relative, not absolute, but a relative contraindication. What is important to us here? Uh, okay, on medical history, she is known hypertensive and diabetic. There is no known contraindication for diabetic and hypertensive patients for LA. So, next coming to the significant liver disease. Remember one thing, for such questions, the answer will be in the question only. So, the main important point here is significant liver dysfunction and which LA is contraindicated. Is it simple now? So, as we know, LA is divided into esters and amides. Ignore my handwriting, please. So, esters and amides. So, esters are again divided into esters of benzoic acid and esters of para-amino benzoic acid, and amides have various examples. So, esters have only one I in their names except piperocane, which has two I's. Tetracane is an ester. So, these two are esters. This one is example of quinolone, and amides have two I's, okay, in their example. So, articane is a amide. Amides are metabolized in liver. So, amides have one I and examples have two I's and they are metabolized in the liver, which also has I. So, easy. So, the answer here is articane. Amides are metabolized in liver, but the patient has significant liver dysfunction. Hence, it is a relative contraindication in such patients. Okay. So, one more thing is esters are contraindicated in patients with deficiency of enzyme pseudocholinesterase, as they are metabolized by the enzyme pseudocholinesterase. So, the answer here is articane. Coming to the explanation. Local anesthetic agents are divided into various categories. So, coming on to the chemical structure, it is divided into esters, amides and quinolones. Quinolone example is centribucridine. Amides, as I told, it has two I's in their name. Okay. Esters are divided into esters of benzoic acid and esters of para-amino benzoic acid. Esters of benzoic acid have one I in their name except piperocane, which has two I's. Okay. Then tetracane. Esters of para-amino benzoic acid has pro in their name. Examples chloroprocane, procane and propoxycane. Coming to the metabolism. As we know, esters are hydrolyzed in the plasma by enzyme pseudocholinesterase. So, persons with atypical pseudocholinesterase, which is a hereditary trait, are relatively contraindicated in such patients because they won't be able to hydrolyze the ester local anesthetic agent. Coming to the amide local anesthetics, the primary site is liver. As I told, amide has one I, so remember liver also has one I and hence they are metabolized in liver. Easy? Okay, they are metabolized in the liver by what? They are metabolized by hepatic microsomal enzymes. So, in patients with liver dysfunction, the La in the blood may be accumulated, and hence there is rise in the blood anesthetic levels and they won't be metabolized. So, the answer is articaine. Next, coming to the second question. A tumor was identified on CT scan in the foramen marked below. For such questions, first what you have to do is identify the image given below. It is the crania basalis picture given. So, what are all the foramen here? So, this is the foramen magnum. So, this is the foramen which they have given here, which the star mark is the jugular foramen, which is present in the posterior cranial fossa. This is the anterior, this is the middle, and this is the posterior cranial fossa. So in the jugular foramen, so see the options. As there is only one option with jugular foramen, so you must be pretty sure about this. In final exam, the answers won't be like this. They can have, they will be intermixing of the answers, like jugular foramen can be with foramen ovale, or jugular foramen can be with trigeminal neuralgia. So you have to be very careful while answering it. So the question here is identify the foramen and mark the most likely neurological deficit. So coming to the answer, the answer here is C. So the explanation part, as we know, that is the jugular foramen. See here, this is the foramen magnum, this is the jugular foramen, this is the carotid canal, and from the jugular foramen what all structures passes is 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve. Sorry, this is 9th. This is the 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerves, which arise from the medulla oblongata and are involved in the gag reflex. So any damage to that foramen can lead to loss of gag reflex. So there are various other structures which pass through the jugular foramen. Jugular foramen is divided into anterior part, middle part and posterior part. Anterior part, inferior petrosal sinus, is most important component which passes through jugular foramen, as they have asked many times in the exam. So the next coming is meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery and sigmoid sinus. So there are two sinuses passing through jugular foramen, that is inferior petrosal sinus and sigmoid sinus. Then middle part, 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerves pass. 9th one is glossopharyngeal nerve, 10th one is vagus nerve and 11th one is spinal accessory nerve. Coming to the posterior part, internal jugular vein and meningeal branch of occipital artery passes. Okay, is this clear? Next, coming to the third question. I feel it is easier now how to handle such questions, right? So coming to the third question, a 15-year-old boy with infected acne, okay, the patient has infected acne, was noted to have high-grade fever, acute onset of severe headache. So remember, this is very important, acute onset. Then the point here is infected acne, periorbital edema, chemosis of right eye and decreased visual acuity. So before seeing the options, why don't you just recollect from whatever you have learned, like where are all the symptoms seen, if there is damage to any part or any sinus. So it's like upon taking history, it was he tried to drain the pustules on his lower part of the nose. Okay, so the lower part of the nose and the upper lip is also known as dangerous area of face. So we have heard many times in anatomy class, like don't this is the most common question asked for people in BDS, first BDS, second BDS and in oral surgery. So the lower part of the nose and the upper lip are dangerous areas of face, and the emissary veins here are directly connected to the cavernous sinus. So we are not supposed to drain the pustules there. So hence, what could be the probable diagnosis is, the answer is cavernous sinus thrombosis. But how will you eliminate the options if you have a doubt? In actinomycosis, there will be pus discharge. Sulfur granules will be seen. In maxillary sinusitis, patient, it is not acute, it is chronic. And in acute maxillary sinusitis also, the patient will not have such symptoms of periorbital edema and chemosis. And in meningitis, patient will have long-term history. Not in meningitis also. In meningitis also, patient won't have such severe symptoms. Patient will have headache, fever. Okay, so coming to the answer is cavernous sinus thrombosis. Coming to the explanation part, as we know that the patient here tried draining the pustule. So the lower part of the nose and upper lip is known as dangerous area of the face, and the facial vein directly communicates through the cavernous sinus through the emissary veins. So infection of the face can spread in the retrograde direction and can cause thrombosis of cavernous sinus, leading to such severe symptoms. So now coming to the flow chart, how are the facial veins and cavernous sinus connected? So first, facial vein drains into deep facial vein, and then the deep facial vein drains into the pterygoid venous plexus through emissary veins, which directly drain into the cavernous sinus. Coming to the clinical features of cavernous sinus thrombosis. Firstly, patient will have acute onset of severe headache and fever, and orbital pain, periorbital edema, and visual disturbance. There's chemosis, which is nothing but swelling of conjunctiva, and there is facial cranial nerve abnormalities, focal cranial nerve abnormalities, and exophthalmos, which is nothing but bulging of the eye anteriorly out of the orbit, and there is increased fluid intraocular pressure in the eye. So there is decreased visual acuity, and there is reduced sense of touch and or sensation. There is nuchal rigidity, which is nothing but neck stiffness, photophobia, and headache. So these are the clinical features of cavernous sinus thrombosis. Next, coming to the fourth question. A child's mother complains of bilateral swelling of the face of her child. See how difficult the question is to understand in that panic moment when you're trying to give an exam. So I am really telling you guys, there were such questions in the exam. So see now, a child's mother was complains of bilateral swelling of face of her child, which was, the important point here is firm on palpation and non-tender. So coming to the serum calcium levels were found to be serum calcium levels are found to be normal, and there is increased alkaline phosphatase levels. On histological examination, it was similar to central giant cell granuloma, and on radiological examination, the image was seen. What can you see in the image? There are multilocular swellings, radio lucencies, and there are multiple unerupted teeth, and the teeth are also floating. So this could be an example of cherubism. See here, the swellings are bilateral, okay, firm on palpation, and main important point here is they are non-tender, and the alkaline phosphatase levels are elevated in cherubism. And histological examination also shows similar to central giant cell granuloma, and the radiological examination, there are multiple radiolucencies and floating teeth, which is also known as floating teeth syndrome. So if you have doubt here, how will you eliminate the options here? See, in mumps, okay, there may be single or bilateral swelling, but the swelling is painful. Okay. In sialadenitis, which is nothing but inflammation of salivary glands, it may be unilateral. This is also painful. Buccal space infection, most commonly it can be due to caries tooth. Okay, first thing. And secondly, this is also painful. So except cherubism, all other options are painful. This is how you have to eliminate the options in the exam and choose the correct answer. Coming to the explanation part of cherubism. Cherubism is an autosomal dominant fibroosseous lesion of the jaws that occur bilaterally and symmetrically and usually produce a cherubic look. So the lesion is firm on palpation and non-tender and most commonly involves molar to coronoid region, which is often associated with cervical lymphadenopathy. Okay, this eye to heaven appearance can also be given in the question, so blindly mark for cherubism. So a rim of sclera may be visible beneath the iris, giving a classic eye to heaven appearance. Coming to the oral manifestations, there is premature exfoliation of the teeth, there is displacement of the teeth, there is transposition and rotations of the teeth. And radiographic features shows multilocular cystic expansion of the jaws, numerous unerupted teeth, destruction of the alveolar bone, which leads to a floating tooth syndrome. Okay. Next, coming to the last question, which was recently asked in NEET 2020 exam. So this question is: a 40-year-old female patient complains of difficulty in swallowing and coughing. So on taking detailed history, the patient said the pain was sharp, shooting, severe and excruciating in nature and located in the posterior part of tongue and tonsil. It was mostly unilateral and rapidly subsiding type of pain. What could be the probable diagnosis? So coming to trigeminal neuralgia, the trigger points are usually on the face, but here the trigger point is posterior part of tongue and tonsil. So that is, this option is eliminated. Then coming to sphenopalatine neuralgia, patient will have alarm clock headache, which is nothing but on the same time and every day on the same time the patient will have similar type of headache. Next, coming to glossopharyngeal neuralgia and suppose you don't know what is paratrigeminal neuralgia, then go to glossopharyngeal neuralgia. Go to the next option and see. So in glossopharyngeal neuralgia, the patient will have the pain mostly in the posterior part of tongue and tonsil, and patient will have difficulty in swallowing and coughing. So the answer is option D. So coming to the explanation part, glossopharyngeal neuralgia occurs without gender predilection and the pain is sharp, severe, shooting in nature. The patient usually has a trigger zone in the posterior oropharynx, as I told, in the posterior part of tongue and pharynx and tonsillar fossa. The etiology is unknown and patient has difficulty in swallowing, talking, yawning and coughing. So yeah, these were the 5 questions which I have made on my own just to explain you people, and hope you have liked the questions, and I think you were able to answer at least few of them. So I would like to tell you one thing, if you can dream it, you can do it. So just dream about what you want to achieve, and that will be most helpful in what you have to achieve. Okay, thank you everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and all the best for your NEET exam. Thank you.